As you know, we've been trying to get the ice plant replaced over at the rec center, and as you also know, that is the main piece of infrastructure that makes ice for us, for the ice arena. We have come to the conclusion that although we don't save a whole ton of money, we do save some money by moving the ice plant from the event center, which is currently in non-active status, if you will, down to the ice arena to use it there. The obvious advantage in my mind is that A, we do save a little money, but B, in the event that we do decide to ever expand what's available at the ice arena, that plant will have that capacity to make that expansion happen, and thereby even save money then at that point too, in my mind. And so, according to that, we will need an amendment that helps us to put our scope in the appropriate perspective and get moving with the project. So with that, Andrew, if you have any other facts, or even Mr. Cortez, I'd be happy to defer the floor.
Your Honor, Counsel, I don't have a lot to add. Moving the ice plant from the event center down to the ice arena will require a new building to house this ice plant that won't fit in the existing space that is currently housing the ice plant. So that's a lot of the expense that you see coming from the architect and our consultant is in that redesign of all the power, electrical, and all that worked out. So a lot of that cost is involved with that transition. And then also figuring out how to plumb it from the event center and fix it into plumbing into the new ice arena. But Carter's right, we're looking at $250,000 savings by utilizing the existing plant rather than having to purchase a new one. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Brent.
When we have, say an ice show does come in, we'll still have all the stuff on the floor, and they usually bring their own ice plant anyway, right? They don't bring their ice plant? How did we have ice capades there before?
Yeah, what they do is they bring in temporary ice, and it's kind of a
Oh, it's
acrylic
plastic.
almost. Yep, and it snaps
Okay.
together and they put it down. And even when we had our ice plant, they still preferred their own
Yeah.
acrylic stuff that they're used to.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But the piping will remain under that flooring, so if 20 years down the, well, I don't know, maybe that's too long for the longevity of it.
Could
But
we-
that piping would, you would plug in another
Yeah,
compressor.
let's inert it before we just plug it off, like put nitrogen in it or argon in it or something.
We would do what they recommend as far as mothballing it, if you will.
Yeah.
And don't lose the plans. You got plans somewhere.
Jesse?
Yeah, so we're saving $250,000. What's the total cost? Is it $750,000 at that point, or?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, it's actually more in the neighborhood of 1.2. Is that right?
We're hoping it becomes a little less than 1.2, 1.1.
Okay.
Right in that ballpark, right around 1.1 million. Utilizing the chiller from the event center.
Yes.
How long is this gonna take, from start to finish, approximately? You're smiling.
I am smiling. We are optimistically hoping that this new ice plant, this construction will be completed by October of 2019.
So when will there be downtime when will kids not be able to skate during this whole period?
The summertime. It'll be down, construction will occur during the summer. Get all this, that you may see some construction begin prior to that, like the building that is needed to house the chiller. But the actual ice will be taken out of service probably beginning in June, in that time frame for this is going to take place.
Thank you.
Ideally.
Ideally, yes.
Go ahead, Mike.
Is there anybody that says anything about having any of the things that the Wolves dreamed about being at the event center on ice up there? Is there, you know?
Me and Carter have met with Peter Wold, and is the spokesman of the family, and I appreciate that because that was probably one of our biggest concerns that we had for the project of kind of thinking of this. And I've spoken to Peter probably a handful of times about this very thing, albeit that it's not optimal and the vision wasn't realized by the family like they had thought it would unfold. They do agree that this is the best route to take something that is just kind of rusting away, if you will, and putting it into service and then still, in some way, shape, or form, capturing part of that vision.
But so, there's nobody anywhere on the horizon that's saying, oh, we're gonna have a semi-pro hockey team or anything like that stuff.
There has been some talk of that, even from the Wolf family, like, maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, but as they have sold the Coyotes to the Bobcats, I think they've reprioritized. They're kind of probably back at the drawing board, if you will, to see if they want to follow up with any additional projects like that. And I haven't heard of any other
Okay.
people other than who's owning the Bobcats at this moment.
Other questions? So you just need us to try to move forward?
Well, we'll prepare amendment for the floor and go from there.
Okay.
Cool. Great.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, the Wyoming Business Council application for Midwest Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Consistent with applications that we've made to the Business Council in the past, when we move forward, we need council's blessing to do so as a part of the rules of the program, whatever program it is that we apply to with the Business Council. In this particular project, we are anticipating having a public hearing, as again consistent with the rules, as well as a resolution supported by all of you that hopefully anyway that would allow us to make official and formal application to the Business Council. We thought it'd be helpful tonight to go over some of the details of the project so that all the elements of the resolution would be clear to you, that we would prepare for your formal adoption. And again, just kind of remind you of the process and so forth involved with respect to the program as well as the scope of the project. And so if I could defer to Mr. Beamer again, that would be very helpful.
Your Honor, Council, what we're applying for is a Wyoming Business Council Community Readiness Grant, which allows funding up to $3 million, of which the Midwest reconstruction between Elm Street to Walnut Street is eligible for. You may recall back in this fiscal year, you allocated $2.2 million to the Midwest Avenue reconstruction project. We were hoping to get from David to Spruce with that funding, but with this allocation of this grant fund, we're hoping to get all the way to Walnut, and we won't utilize all that 2.2. I imagine what we'll put in as a final official request is $2.5 million request to the Business Council, and we'll use $650,000 of the 1 cent funding that was allocated as a match, which requires a 10% match, and that will hopefully allow us to get all the way from Elm all the way to Walnut. And if you recall, Walnut was already improved between Yellowstone and Midwest. It'll be a nice connected corridor. We still won't have the final stretch between Walnut and Poplar Street done, nor the connecting streets going down Spruce and Oak and those stuff.
Question? Okay. Oh, great.
I'm sorry. And when will we get to Poplar to Walnut? Because that really is the worst stretch.
Your Honor, Council, if we get the Business Council grants, the $2.2 million that you allocated this fiscal year, you won't need, but maybe you'll still have $1.5 million roughly of that money available, and that gets you awful close to getting that final 2 blocks. You may need to allocate a little more money, a little more funding to get us all the way to Poplar Street, but we'll be awful close.
Thanks.
Oh, Jess.
Just a quick positive note to the bad side of the street and what's recently paved and redone. Mechanics love it. So when you're trying to hear something, you go on the terrible city street that has a bunch of bumps and potholes.
It rattles.
And when you've got the problem fixed, you drive on the nice newly paved road. So they like having that close together.
That was intended that way.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Councilman, that really is only meant to be a temporary measure, by the way, that patch. And so we will still need to reconstruct the road, even where that patch has been put. It was just meant to kind of keep things at a dull roar when you go through the street with your vehicles and so forth. So just so you're aware.
Cool. Thank you. Moving right along, the new animal care and control ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, Council, there's been a lot of work put in, not only by the Attorney's Office, but also from Councilman Walsh and the Police Chief with regard to this proposal that you are getting to review this evening. If I could defer to Mr. Henley to kind of walk through a lot of the nuances, and Councilman Walsh as well, of the ordinance. Essentially what we would need is your feedback on the proposal in preparation for the reading process that, as you know, includes a public hearing and public comment and those kinds of things along throughout the 3 reading process that it takes to put an ordinance into place. And so with that, if I could defer to the attorney and Councilman Walsh, that'd be great.
Good evening, thank you all, Mayor, Councilman, Mr. Napier. Handed out to you this evening a white sheet that was prepared by Councilman Walsh. And he had talked about presenting this when we first started this process, about kind of addressing the problem and then kind of going through. And we have kind of a different process with public review, which I think will be kind of interesting, particularly since this ordinance is really quite lengthy, has a lot of nuances, addresses a lot of different kind of stakeholders. And so in that regard, we're going to present this, of course, to you tonight. Hope that you give it approval to be presented to the public. And the thought process is that we've actually posted on the city's website and then have a dedicated user group where people could then write back in, post their comments, so then we could collect those comments, take a look at them, and then go in and see if we need to make any type of substantial changes before we go to the public hearing and the first reading with you. If in fact that is the case that we would do that, I think it'd probably be up to Councilman Walsh as to whether he wanted to have another work session or whether we just go to the first reading and have a bunch of ordinances or amendments ready to go with that first reading. So it's really kind of an interesting process. It's generated a lot of public interest already. I've only received a couple of requests for interviews from Katie and Mr. Cotton here. Oh, Mr. Cotton over there. But I've also received some calls from just the public, which is unusual for me to get. I mean, I get calls occasionally from the press, but the public's called in, and actually all of the calls I've received have been positive. So I'm pretty happy about that. I know that some people will be concerned about, this nuance or that nuance. So hopefully we can assuage those fears, or we can remedy those if there are problems. But in looking at the ordinance, it started off really with some concerns about the number of dog bites we've been having. And I know Councilman Walsh, the police chief, Tory have all been very concerned about that, and I know that my office staff has been concerned about that, Mr. Zakelli. And so we are hoping that this will help to educate the public, maybe focus the public on some of their obligations, and as a last resort, for those members of public who abuse their dogs, don't take care of their dogs, tether their dogs too long, they become vicious, they become mean, they're really a nuisance to the community, and I do mean a nuisance to the community, that we can take some remedial action to try to educate those people if they really do want to own a dog. In that regard, the ordinance starts with some of the basic type of things, everything from animals running at large. So in this case, we go through all of that process, and we talk about it not only not being on a leash when you're on public property, but even if it's on your own property, you want to make sure that that dog cannot injure children, that type of thing. Of course, if it's a vicious dog, you have to, by ordinance, proposed ordinance, maintain that dog within the confines so that it can't hurt postmen, that type of thing. It'll have to be caged. The cage will have to be big enough so that it's a humane cage so that it won't make the dog any more mean or dangerous. But that's kind of an interesting twist on the at-large ordinance. In addition to that, though, we've had some concerns about people because in Wyoming we take our dogs in our trucks or in our cars, and they're with us a lot of the time. And in that regard, there was some concern about the dogs. And I actually had a niece who got out of her car, turned around, and a dog bit her nose off down in Colorado. And so, dogs on the back of the pickups coming over the pickup, maybe being startled, maybe being mean, who knows what, and attacking people. And you never know who's going to be attacked or how badly they're going to be injured. So in this regard, we have a definition for at large too, so even if it's in the vehicle, but it can get its head beyond the cab of the vehicle or outside the confines of the bed of the pickup truck, then that would be an at-large dog as well. And you can be cited for that, and it's possible that if it were a dangerous situation, then animal protection officers would have the ability to actually move in and take control of the animal if necessary. So that's kind of the most basic type of level. And then we start addressing public nuisance, and so again, we address public nuisance, everything
Can
from.
I ask a question? Because if you go through all this, I won't remember the question for each part we're talking
Of
about.
course.
So I see all these people, including myself, at times where the dog's head's hanging out the window as you're going down the street. They like it,
Sure.
especially hot. Does your ordinance make that illegal?
You know, I think if you were to read the ordinance, technically it would probably be illegal because the dog's head would be out, but it wouldn't be in a parked vehicle, so it really wouldn't be causing anyone any harm. So I don't think that there would be any type of citation for that. But if you look at the actual, just the wording of the ordinance, obviously the muzzle of the dog, the mouth and the nose of the dog would be outside the confines of the cab of the vehicle, so therefore it would technically be a violation of running at large. But since it's not posing any danger to anyone, I don't see that anyone would be concerned about that.
Is the same true if the guy's got his 2 or 3 dogs in the back of the truck and he's going down the street and the dogs are enjoying the air, but they're not tethered to the truck? Because I see a lot of those big dogs that'll stand upon the edge of the truck.
You know, I don't know about that. It would seem to me that, you know, in that situation, if they could jump out and actually go at someone, if you have a child who was riding their bike the opposite way and could get out and the child could be attacked by the dog if the dog just jumped out of the truck and the dog pulled up to a yield sign and almost came to a stop or came to a stop sign and then jumped out and attacked the child, that could be a violation.
Do other cities, western cities especially, where people have dogs, hunting dogs on, do they have a similar ordinance to that?
I don't know about that.
Because another thing Wallace has said from time to time is who's gonna enforce that? People going down the street with their dog, I saw it coming down here. Dogs in the back of pickup trucks especially, and then I see elderly people like myself and they roll the window down, the little dog sticks his head out the door. So if that's technically illegal, if both of those are technically illegal, it's kind of like the snow removal ordinance. You can't shovel your little bit of snow out in the street. It's going to irritate the public tremendously. I saw a guy that wrote an email that kind of outlined that. I don't know if you saw that. Where he says, at large defines that my dogs cannot be in my front yard without being tethered.
I don't think that's true. I
Not
think that
true.
would be a mistake. He maybe hasn't, maybe that's maybe he's read something or heard something else. But actually, if they're confined to his property and can't get out, whether it's by fence, cage, you can't tether, though this ordinance is very good because we address cruelty to animals. And one of those things that gets a lot of attention is tethering. Because if you think about how dogs get so mean, they get left alone, they get tethered to something or another, they can't move very far, they can't roll over comfortably, so they get tangled up in it, they can't go and try to find shade, they don't have adequate water, they don't have adequate
Do you own a dog?
Not right now, I don't, sir. I had one, though, as you will recall, Stevie the Wonder Dog.
My grandmother was down walking by the post office down here, was walking by, and this Rottweiler reached out and bit her arm pretty severely, just walking down the street. So that's always been a concern of mine about that kind of thing. And then there was a guy parked in a truck out in front of my office, and his dog was up in the bed, and I walked by, and the dog came out. And so it is a problem, but I'm just wondering how you really enforce that, especially when the dog has done nothing, you know.
Well, if the dog's been treating cruelty, this is why we've put this provision in about the cruelty to animals. The animal protection officers actually have a basis to go and knock on the door and say, you know, look, I've heard reports about this, I can look over your fence, I can see that your dog's sitting there, it's in a puddle of water, it looks miserable, it's surrounded by feces. You have all of these horrible things, and so this statute or this ordinance would go a long ways to give the animal enforcement, animal protection officers some ability to address things, and hopefully educate too. we're hoping that with a little bit of public media, social media, that people will be attentive to this. And like I say, already it seems to have generated quite a bit of press and quite a bit of public interest. And I think the way that this is going to be presented by getting it posted on our website with an opportunity for people to respond to a particular user group, and then we'll compile those, I think that'll go a little bit farther in that regard as well. So we're hopeful that those provisions would be approved by you, but if you have any suggestions for additional provisions, either whether to make them more stringent or less stringent, I know that everyone would be interested in hearing about that.
So I've got Sean, Charlie, Mike, and Bob. Sean.
So that was also my question, is that large, and the animal hanging their head out the window. What about those that bring their animals with them and they park their car in the parking lot? They're not allowed to crack their windows anymore? And if that's the case, are the police still gonna be able to come and bust the windows out of cars if the dog is in a hot car?
Yeah. Part of it is that in this case, you cannot let the dog again attack people as they're walking by.
Mhm.
So you can have your window cracked, but they cannot have it cracked to the extent that the muzzle, the nose and the mouth can get outside the confines of the cabin. And so therefore, on a particularly hot day though, it's going to be illegal to have your dog inside the car. If it's 70 degrees or more, you have to make sure that if you're going to leave the dog there, you better leave the air conditioning on, you better have water in the car, and you better crack the windows as much as you can without violating the ordinance. So again, that would be one of the animal cruelty provisions that we're concerned about this. And when Councilman Walsh and Mr. Napier and myself met with some of the people from the Humane Society type of organizations, that was a real concern of theirs, is that sometimes we'll see this happening and it'll be hard for the animal protection officers or police department to actually feel like they can do something because they didn't have it defined specifically enough. So we've tried to put a bit of specificity with this, but still let them utilize some judgment. And so in that regard, there would be some concerns there, but I think it would be best for the public if they can't get out and have a dog bite a child when some mom's walking by, but at the same time let them know, hey, look, you can have this, but you better have the temperature down and crack it not too much.
Right. Okay. So was the original ordinance just not strict enough or specific enough? Or
It didn't have any specificity with respect to the temperature. It's hard to measure when it's an outdoor temperature, ambient temperature versus an inside temperature.
Right.
And it was hard to do that. I know Councilman Walsh did some research on that, and some people said, well, 70 degrees might be too high, maybe 60 degrees would be better. Others are saying, well, no, 60 degrees is really too low, and you're not going to be able to take your dog with you anytime. So this was kind of a compromise that we came to.
Okay.
Charlie.
First off, thank you both for addressing this. I think it's, given that, I was amazed at the number of bites that we've had, and that's a traumatic thing for anyone to go through, and it can be disfiguring, so, or even lethal. I thought you had this covered with animals and motor vehicles, 604210. You say, no person shall leave a dog unattended in a bed of a pickup truck in a public parking area unless the dog is restrained in such a manner. I guess it doesn't really address the dog that's in a moving vehicle, but I thought the intent of it was to say that it can't have access to someone who is a place where a pedestrian is legally entitled to be. Well, a pedestrian isn't legally entitled to be alongside of a moving vehicle.
Right. And that may be a good amendment too, just to put it there that, in a moving vehicle where the pedestrian is not entitled to be. I suppose the other thing at that point then is, if you have a dog that's, barking and kind of lunging in the back of your pickup, even if the pedestrian is not there right next to it, you have kids out playing and chasing each other, which, kids will do, and the dog sees them chasing, the dog can still attack those little children and have a bad incident.
And I just thought I would point out, we already did pass a tethering ordinance. I don't know where it is in our list of ordinances, but
I was
tethering is.
actually still working when we did that, and I believe it's like 10 hours.
Okay, this I'm sure is different.
This tightens the time frame on it.
Yeah, okay. We already do have one, it just doesn't probably have these same specifics, so that's it for me.
Mike.
Well, people are gonna go nuts about this, and if you think that the property maintenance code brought people out of the woodwork, that ain't nothing to what happens with dogs. I mean, Chief, I don't know how it was wherever you came from, but I think Councilman Walsh will back me up on this, that, you know, in Casper, you can kill as many people as you want to, and nobody gets excited about it, but boy, you do something to a dog, and man, I mean, the people are on you, and that's, that, you know, that, I just wanna give you the benefit of my experience and my career on that, so I think we really need to be ready to explain these things, and I think this dog at large is a large part of, you know, is a real big part of this and everything. Like the guy that I think I got that same email from that guy saying, talking about, well, my dog in my front yard. Well, if that dog's in a properly fenced, properly enclosed front yard, and somebody goes into that yard, well, you know, they went to the nuisance there. But if the dog's just running around loose in that front yard, you know, that's the old story. Oh, my dog would never go off of my property. Well, no, that doesn't adequately protect people. As far as the dogs riding around in the back of trucks, I've been walking down the street quite a few times, and especially times when I'm walking my dog, and the dogs go by in a pickup truck like that, and I'd swear they're going to jump out and come after us. And so, no, I think that they should be restrained in there, because it doesn't, you know, if we're going to protect people, and the purpose of this too is to protect the animal and those things, because, you know, dogs sees another dog and decides it's time to jump out and everything. You know, that's not a good thing. I looked at this, and frankly, Mr. Kenley, I thought, and Chris, I thought you guys did a really good job at trying to cover these things and covering them in a reasonable manner and everything. And I think that we will have to explain to people that, you know, as with any law or ordinance, you know, there's going to have to be some common sense enforcement. And yeah, you know, if the dog's asleep in the back of the truck with its head up on the edge of the bed and doing nothing, and it, you know, any police officer or animal control officer that would run those guys down and do something about that, I don't think would be very long for being employed with the city. But I really think that these things, but that, you know, the product that you've got here, you know, is a pretty good, darn good product. But we're going to have to really be ready to show people, because, and now I do have a question, having made all those comments. This is a complete rewrite of this, not just a redlining and changing a few things here and there. Am I correct? Or
You know, there were so many red lines it basically became a complete rewrite.
Okay.
There are some provisions, the beekeeper provision. If we changed 4 words, I would be shocked. But on the other hand, you know, really the substantive provisions that we're talking about, there is a huge rewrite.
yeah, okay. I think though that also we're going to need to be ready with the existing ordinance to show people that, look, at probably 90% of what's in here is already covered by the existing ordinance, and we're just trying to tweak it and make it more clear with some of these things. So I would just suggest that we have that existing ordinance ready to show people side by side.
Bob. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank you. I think this is a good ordinance. I think it needs to be done. Animals are out of control. You know, with 721 instances, and of those 500 and some dog bites, if you assume 10% of those dog bites end up in an ER call, there's $1,000 a whack. This is not a pittance here. So I think we need to address it, and I think we need to be strict about it. There's one more that I didn't see in here, but the assistant dog driver that's in their lap and they're driving around town, how do we cover that? What makes that okay or against the law? I mean, I see it all the time.
What,
Is
the
there-
dog sitting in the front seat?
No,
Sitting
sitting
in
on
the
the
driver's
driver's seat.
Helping the driver.
Helping the driver.
Oh, you can
I
see
think he
that on
monitors the
my car.
speedometer or something. I'm not sure exactly what he monitors, but
I did have one other quick question. Did the person survive the bull mastiff bite? I noticed that one of those was a bull mastiff. How did that person do?
I do not know.
He was
None,
eating,
none of them.
he was
have been
eating, never
fatal.
seen from again.
Chris.
Yeah, I want to back up a little bit, just to give you a point of reference on why I think this is necessary. And the city attorney has to prosecute these cases, and of course, animal control officers have to deal with it every day. So before we start going through and placing a victim status on the offenders in the community that create the problem, I asked for details on bites, impacts, and that kind of thing between January 1 of 2017 through June of 2018. So that's 543 days. During that time frame, 721 animal attacks or bites occurred in the city of Casper. That's either,
That's reportable.
that's all reported. Of course it is. I wouldn't know if it
I
wasn't.
mean, but there are some that may not have been.
Of course, so yeah, but those are the ones reported to us within the city. So it only applies to the city, not the county, not Mills, not Evansville. They can do whatever they choose to do. Within the city, when you have more than one of these encounters a day, picture if we were having people violently assaulted by third person, unknown individual every single day in this town. What would that uproar
You
look
mean
like?
like Chicago?
Yeah, what would that look like? And then,
Like Chicago.
you know, of that, 539 of those were bites to humans. Some of those are substantial. Some of those are kids. Those are people that have done nothing wrong. They're out in public. The common scenario is you're walking your dog on a leash, a large aggressive animal goes over its fence, through its fence, or is at large, literally rips that small dog apart while it's on the end of a leash. And the individual that's trying to stop them that owns it. And that's unacceptable to me. It goes so far beyond, well, I like to let my dog ride in the back of the truck. Cool. Restrain him so that he cannot become a victim or an offender. I think the world of my dog. I do not let him run loose in my front yard because he's a dog. And I know about all dogs bite and all horses kick, and you're a fool if you think anything different. Our ordinances were just old. They were mostly from '84, had some addendum or updates to them, but not really. And the updates were things like bees and chickens being incorporated into it, but not the root cause problem. I mean, back then in 1983, I believe, is when the shelter was built collectively with 1 cent money. You know what they called the director of the shelter? The official title? Pound Master General. It was a dog pound. It was the mentality of things. You didn't have people taking animals into every restaurant in town, every store in town, everywhere they went. There wasn't that kind of interaction. There is now. So we have to keep up with the time. And what's the biggest problem with animals? I know you guys can all guess it. Everybody knows. Humans, the person that raises them. So this also has a mechanism to address chronic and habitual offenders, to put an end to them being able to possess and create more dangerous animals. I think you should be able to walk your dog. I think you should be able to walk your dog. My mom should be able to walk her dog in any public space and not worry about something horrific happening. And it happens a lot here. Too much. Prosecutors didn't have the tools to handle it. Animal control officers didn't have the tools to handle it. I think this will give it to them. And the judge nailed it right on the head. There's two things in this town that will make the public go crazy: parking and dogs.
And chicken and bees. Which I want to point out,
That's
there's
nothing
zero attacks by chickens or bees in the cities.
That's nothing compared to dogs.
Yeah, trust us, Sean.
I have the
Chickens and
floor.
bees
Gentlemen,
ain't
I have the
nothing.
floor. Where's the conch shell?
Shh, quiet, listen to Chris.
That's why I would like, instead of our typical method being, we speak about it in a work session, the information's available to the public, but we take another step. We put this on the website. Mr. Hanley's developed a mechanism to do that. We prolong our actual official readings, maybe a couple weeks, allow written feedback to come in, and we can incorporate any changes we see fit. But I wanted you all to see it, and I've sent this out today to some people in the community that have spoken to me about it prior to. But I wanted you all to get it first, so that when somebody comes up and says, "What's this ordinance plan?" you're not blindsided by it. People have plenty of opportunities to speak on it outside of having to come to a council meeting. And we find the best solution we can, and that solution will not suit everybody. And there's a definite need based on the statistics. So I would encourage take the time, read it, review it. I would like to see it move forward to at least be posted for public comment for the review tonight, but that would be a collective decision.
Alice?
Couple things. I do a lot of walking with my dog, as everybody knows. And if I had to put a priority on it, it's this. The leash law isn't being enforced, period. I go down, anywhere I go, the dogs are running. Mine is usually the only leash dog, except when I get downtown, you'll see people with the leash. But in Nance English Park, I keep wanting to call the police. I was over there the other night, there's 4 big dogs running around and none of them are on a leash. Sometimes I go over there and they'll see me and now they know who I am, so they run their dog down, they put it on a leash. But the other day, I have my dog on a leash and we're coming down across the street from the Wonder Bar, and here's this big, beautiful bulldog coming right at me. So whenever I see anything like that, I pick my dog up. Here comes this big bulldog, and I'm turning and he's chasing. He finally jumps up on me, but he's not mean to my dog. So I go in Pete Owens' store and they said, well, they saw the dog in this white pickup and the dog jumped out. Well, and then the dog ran off. So I'm walking down the street to Lou Talbert's, and around the corner comes a guy, and he's got the dog by the dog collar, and he knows whose dog it is, and it belongs in this white truck. So I went to Lou Talbert's, came back, the white truck was still there, but the dog was gone. I hope the guy didn't lose the dog, but the problem is, I think, two biggest problems. The biggest one is that the leash law isn't being enforced. So we got that, but it isn't being enforced. And I'm not gonna call the police when I go over there to walk my dog anywhere. And then there's occasionally people over by Bob's place where they let the dog run, it's on a leash. I said this one girl, after the dog gets all tangled up with me, says, you're supposed to have this on a leash. Well, says that he is on a leash. I said, yeah, but you have to hold on to the leash. So a lot of people think they can get away with it by letting the dog go with the leash on it. It's not being enforced. The other one is, and bless their hearts, most people don't pick up dog poop. So I'm over, I walk the dog over by the Catholic Senior Citizen Center, and they've got little poop bags. The city's got poop bags. I love that because I have them all the time. There they are, and so I'm cleaning his poop up, and as I'm walking off the grounds over there at the Senior Citizen Center, I step in a big pile of poop. And I can always prove it isn't my dog, because usually it's as big as he is. So those two things don't get enforced. And if just the leash law got enforced, but here again, Councilman Walsh, I don't know how you enforce that. Because I'm over there all the time. I could take you over there tonight, and there'll be dogs over there, and they won't be on a leash. All sizes of dogs. Some will be, but those big ones, they let them run. They let them run up and down the creek. So I'd like to see enforcement of some of the laws we do have. The one thing this guy said, and maybe you know this, Councilman Walsh, and I thought it was a good question. Where are all these bites occurring? Are most of them occurring at the dog park?
Not even remotely. I mean, you got all the information, so when you look through that packet,
I did look through that, but I didn't notice I noticed the number of bites,
No,
but this
you're right,
guy
this
says,
one-
how many
this-
of these bite attacks registered in the log occurred at the dog park?
there,
Because they let the dogs run wild over there. I mean,
the dog park is
Park.
not ground zero. These are neighborhoods and sidewalks and,
well, I
spread
see
widely
it all.
across the city.
I see it all. I mean, I walked my dog in the neighborhoods downtown everywhere. And the biggest problem, in my opinion, is they're not leashed. And I think if the dogs had to be leashed and people would really do that, these numbers would go down tremendously. And maybe I could see the issue of leashing the dog inside the bed of the truck so it doesn't get out. Because I was walking through this parking lot, and there's a big van that's even higher than my truck. Both labs jumped out the window to come after me and my dog, but they got over there on me before I could pick him up, but they were friendly. So I've had dogs leap out of the car, but it's because of my little dog. And so I agree it's a problem. My biggest problem is how do you enforce it? It's an enforcement nightmare. And
Well,
so
I think you
that's
build a
what-
mechanism so that the ability's there, and then if it's not done, I'm sure the chief knows how to deal with those issues.
Well, he's under manpower now. If all you did was enforce the leash law, I'd be happy.
Mike?
You know, addressing part of Dallas, what you're getting at there, and I think you're onto something. One of the things that I kind of liked about this proposed ordinance that I suspect a lot of people will not like is that it does kind of quantify some of those things a little bit more, so they're a little bit more defined. So, you know, someone can't say, well, it's on a leash. You know, as in your
Has to be.
example, it's, you know, and you can't have a little tiny string on a huge big dog. You know, and so I think that this ordinance goes in the right direction. That way, you know, making it probably a little bit more easy for an officer to sit there and say, well, wait a minute, you know, you don't have that dog leashed, or it's, you know, it can jump out the window, those kind of things. So I think it goes in the right direction to answer a lot of the issues that you're talking about, Dallas.
Well, you can control the dog with the leash,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah.
Charlie and then Jesse.
First off, I support this process you guys have devised. I think this is the best way to do it. There may be some parallels between this and the code, but what's very different is all of the reaction we had to the code was based on third-hand interpretations of it, because they didn't have access to it. And that was a serious mistake. Plus, the reasoning behind this is crystal clear, and that was also absent when we considered the building code. And so, this way, if people are intentionally distorting what this ordinance says, we can direct them right back to the language that says, all you have to do is read it. The actual language is right there. It doesn't say what they're telling you it says. So I think this is a smart way, and it might actually create a precedent for more controversial things down the road.
Jesse?
Thanks. Councilman Powell covered most of what I wanted to say. I did want to mention most newer neighborhoods, they don't allow for fences in your front yard. So I do see a problem of having to have your dog on a leash on your own property. I understand everything's capable and can hurt people or things, but that's going to be a tough one. That's one I have trouble supporting. And then registering a dog, is that any different than what we're doing now? So anytime that you buy an animal, are we already requiring that you have to register it with us? And
Yeah, the registration's always been there. As I'm thinking about the revisions, did we take out tattooing?
Tattooing's out, just put in microchips now.
You know, there was a lot of provisions for tattooing and it's nothing that we ever categorized, but everything's required to have a license in the city limits now.
okay.
And shots.
Rabies vaccination license, and then the rabies vaccination is dependent on the vet that gives it to them, correct, and the length of time. And then if they run afoul, and they're not, then of course there's provisions for that, but they have to be properly vaccinated. You know, we talk about rabies vaccination, that's not a dead disease in the country. And a woman died from it 2 years ago in Fremont County, and we've had 3 bats positive of it just this year, I believe, so in Casper, so.
And then, I guess just to follow up, the other areas that might get a little scary, I guess, is just cleaning up after your dog, not exactly having her mount as soon as you clean up after your dog. So you're picking up dog poop every single day for your dog. What's the acceptable limit? Is there even a limit for your yard? What if you go on vacation and the dog's away, but then you still have, 4 pieces out in your yard? Are you going to be cited for that? Then by the time you get back, you have a warrant out for your arrest?
Well, I don't think it'll go to a warrant first, and I don't have a good answer for that, so I'm looking for that right now to clean it up for it to become a nuisance It has to be such a nuisance that the public health department comes in and declares it unsafe. I don't ever remember a time that happening, which is pretty foul by the time it gets to that point. So there has to be something, and I think during this process, if you can think of somebody or somebody at large can give us a good definition on that, because it can be a problem. And if you go on vacation for 2 weeks, and you haven't cleaning up after your dog, are you taking care of your dog? I mean, I got further questions. So,
Yeah,
if somebody's taking care of them, then give them an extra buck so
I'm
that they
taking
can
dog
clean
cleans,
up.
I'm walking the dog, but it happens on a weekly basis. And then sometimes if there's snow, he doesn't go back there. So he might have a couple of times where it's been 2 weeks since he's picked up any dog poop because of the snow. Then it all melts quickly, like when you have a temperature change, like what you see in Wyoming, and then it's double the amount. So it's just,
I wish I could quantify this. If you're nasty, it's too bad.
Right.
It's too much. If the neighbors are saying, I can't open my windows,
Right.
how do you quantify being nasty? I don't know.
But
But
just putting that in an ordinance, I guess that's my concern.
it's always been in the ordinance, but it's been completely outside. It has to, a medical professional has to say it's
Right.
a hazard.
Well, and I think you still have to show that beyond a reasonable doubt, so you have the proof there how much it was. So the animal protection officers, if you think they're out to get you, they still have to go and show, well, how much it was and why. And you can come in and say, well, I was on vacation for 2 weeks or the snow melted quickly. So again, it gets back to just being reasonable. It's not like these people are out there gunning because they were able to cite somebody because they're on vacation. So in a situation like this, though, you can find animals. The animals are in horrid conditions, and this just adds something else they can visit with the court about as to why this animal should be protected. Right? So I think that's the essence behind it. So to say you have so many presents in your yard, I don't know that that's really the essence of the ordinance. It's really just to give the animal enforcement officers, if they need to, another tool. And for instances like you've raised, you wouldn't get cited because they don't want to take you to court and have the case dismissed, and found not guilty. Why take a person in and have them found not guilty? It just doesn't make any sense. So again, it's just a matter of communication and having a little bit of trust for the system, which I'd like to think that we would have that trust sooner than once that behind the prosecutors and the judge.
I'd rather put more fines and, coming down with a heavy hand if there's a dog bite than saying absolutely no leash. I know that's part of the ordinance, but you go to any park, the whole family's there, including the family dog. They're throwing a tennis ball for the dog. There's no issue I see with that.
There's issue after issue, hundreds of issues.
In isolated incidents,
Not when it's
understand that,
hundreds.
but not every single dog that goes to the park is biting.
You're right about that, but when it's so common, that's when there's off leash places. Use those. But the other thing, and Alice touched on it, I don't ride my bike from Murad Park or go walking from Murad Park because I don't want somebody else's dog jumping on me. Violent or not. I've got my dog, you've got yours. I don't want you and your dog jumping all over me. If I'm going to the park, I don't want your dog up in my picnic. It's rude. And there's not a intrinsic right for a person to own an animal. So be polite, be a responsible pet owner. And I know it's fun to do that. You can go outside the city limits. We have 200 miles of prairie moat between us and the next town where you can play with your dog.
Right. Just we have a neighborhood park within 10 minutes throughout the whole city of Casper, and then only 2 dog parks. And then now we're restricting people from not going to their neighborhood park to throw a ball for the dog.
Yes.
So it's just tough. That's all.
Sean Vindels.
I generally like the ordinance. I think it's good to update old laws, make them coincide more with our time. I think the one thing that's gonna get people in an uproar is that at-large section. So they're gonna take that as, oh, I can't drive down the road with my dog's muzzle hanging out the window. Without being pulled over, or that's just how it's, how it's gonna
We can
come
probably
across.
word that so that it's.
Right, and that's what I was thinking, maybe we could look at a different way of wording that section. or specify it more? 'Cause I mean, that's gonna be the one that people are gonna, oh, so I can't have my window open, but you want us to leave our windows open in the hot car, and I just see it going that way, so.
Dallas.
So I think we ought to have an invited audience of the town hearing on this before we do any voting on it. Because there'll be people with different ideas. You know, that's another thing, I go over there to Nance English Park, and there's a guy throwing a big ball off a stick. But then sometimes we'll go over there and the guy from the Catholic school will have all those kids over there hitting golf balls. And I guarantee you, I don't wanna get hit by a golf ball, but they're using it as a golf course. I don't say a word, it's not a golf course. But what I'm gonna tell you, Councilman Wall, this is an enforcement nightmare. Now, what I'd like to know statistically is if these dogs that bit somebody, if they were on a leash, would they have bit anybody? Because I think that's the answer. But it isn't being enforced. Everything that you're saying, I don't have any, truly, I'm glad it's being addressed. But maybe somehow you can get it enforced. You've kind of drummed that into me. You're talking about a resolution isn't anything. This ordinance isn't anything. The ordinance we have isn't anything. Because guess what? It isn't being enforced. So you police guys need to figure out how to enforce this. Because I can take you there. You can come with me in my morning walk, my afternoon walk, my evening walk, balls, golf balls, people throwing darts, all kinds of stuff in those parks. Crazy stuff in those parks going on all the time. The other day, a kid came down there with what looked to me like an AR-15. It looked like real bullets in it, and I stopped him. He was about 15. Says, well, it's one of those soft deals, but he was out shooting stuff. So I did. I called the police department. They said they would send a car. I don't know what happened there. That was a pretty scary little deal for most people that would have been walking in that park. But, you know, I approached him, 14, 15-year-old kid, but he was running and he was doing something that made me worry about it. And then I get out, here's this big German Shepherd. The guy sees me, he goes and gets the German Shepherd because most of them by now know who I am and that I'm with the city. That doesn't happen for most people. So what I really hope you do after my 69 days are gone is you figure out a way to enforce it, otherwise this ordinance doesn't mean anything.
Well, I think my role right now is to create the mechanism. I don't think I'll swing over to the staff meeting of the PD and tell the chief how to do his enforcement.
I don't think you will.
I'm gonna provide him with the mechanisms and the tools that he needs.
And that's what I try to do with these resolutions. Bring out an awareness in the city, and then if you decide it needs an ordinance, because we're gonna get to bullying and nobody's done anything about it either. There's always some excuse. So it all boils down to enforcement. And what do we have and what does our ability allow us to do? But this, if you have a public meeting on this, I think you'll at least be able to get the public to say what they need to say and see where it is and whether.
I intend to have 3 at each reading, plus multiple times for people to make comment long before they ever have to come in here if they don't choose to do it on our schedule.
Good idea.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say 2 things real quick. One, yes, enforcement's a real big problem, but we don't go around town taking down the speed limit signs and the stop signs because people blow through stop signs and that. And we
They get
don't-
enforced, Mike.
Well,
It's not the
yeah,
same thing. really.
but
This isn't being
well,
enforced. Come with me and see it.
it is, but you know, what you're saying is that there's not an officer there writing a citation and doing that.
But I'm saying
I
it's
see.
not being enforced. And if you wanna ask the chief how many patrol officers wander around through these parks, be interesting to know. Or you come with me, I've never seen an officer in a park unless I've called them or somebody's called them for a specific
Well.
deal. And I don't expect them to put
Yeah.
the officers in there either, because there's other priorities.
Well, there are. The other thing that I would say from walking around town, going door to door campaigning, the places where I've been, the dogs are restrained. People really are, you know, I have yet to encounter an unrestrained dog in walking around some of neighborhoods where you'd think there might be some problems. But the other thing I was going to suggest, we've had a good, productive, wide-ranging discussion here, but we kind of interrupted Mr. Henley's, I'm sure, well-planned and eloquent presentation.
So, I know Carter wanted to make a comment. Did you have some more stuff that you wanted to touch base
No,
on,
I think
John?
we've touched on most everything.
Everything that
so-
needs to be-
so,
okay,
you know, I'd
perfect.
be happy to answer other questions, or of course, you
Okay.
guys all know my phone.
Great. Go ahead, Carter.
Well, I was gonna ask you, Mr. Henley, does the ordinance deal with the leash law at all?
It does. Yeah, and it basically, it's under the at-large provisions, is where it's at primarily. So, under the at-large provisions, it's talked about quite extensively. And then we do have even under that, you know, whether it's on your own property, and you have a different shift, another tact. If you're on the public's property, then you have a different shift, another tact. If it's in a motor vehicle, your motor vehicle. And you have another tact, you're prohibited from having dogs at all in publicly owned cemeteries or golf courses. And so we do address that. And we talk about the type of leash that they have to be on to actually be given material, and it has to be enough to restrain the type of dog that you're handling. And with certain types of dogs, if the dog's been declared vicious, you can only be a 3-foot leash because you really have to have that dog in tow. So really quite a bit of detail, shocking amount, I'd say.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Attorney, I really appreciate the clarification that the ordinance draft makes with regard to leashes and leash laws and requirements and so forth. If any of you have read the current leash law recently, it really is shy about using the word leash and relegating the idea that dogs should be on a leash.
Control.
It talks about voice control and immediate sound and you know, these kinds of things, and to
But
me,
there should be a human on the other end of the leash.
yeah, exactly.
2 dogs, that's a leash. Tie the dogs together.
And so in my estimation, that kind of clarification, I think, is really critical and helpful, and I think the ordinance goes a long way to really improving things for those who really want responsible pet ownership in the community.
Go ahead, Mike.
Did you guys look at the county leash law? Because just now when that about being voice control and all that stuff, it seems to me like the county dog at large thing basically is a leash law, not voice control and that kind of thing. So did you guys look at that?
I did not, Your Honor.
No, I didn't either. I thought the
Because
county
I
was
think there's a
adopted.
chance, there's a chance that on some of these things, that the county resolution might be more narrow and tighter than what the city ordinance currently is on that. Because it seems to me like, when I see those dog at large cases, that it basically is a leash law. But I-
One point I wanted to make, Mike, you've been lucky going out.
Mhm.
I had a case where a little girl, 5 years old, goes with 2 other little girls and goes in somebody else's yard, and this dog comes over and takes a chunk out of her face to cause her whole face to droop down. It's about a $400,000 bill, and will never be right, and the taxpayer paid for this little girl. You should see it. I was gonna show you a picture, I changed my mind. So I've had mail carriers come into me who've been bit. When they go up to put the mail through the doors, the dog bites them. Now they're in their own yard. What do we do there? They weren't hanging over a fence. You go up through somebody's fence and knock on a door, and some dog grabs a hold of one of those big legs of yours. What do? So you've got problems where people are going to be bit by dogs. That may not be unlawful. I had the girl standing next to the 4-wheeler, and this blue heeler standing right there, and she looks over, and the dog takes her cheek out, down the shine. And then everybody said, well, this dog never bit anybody. I went out and found that the dog had bit 2 other people. But this guy didn't have that dog on a leash. So what I'd like to know, Councilman Walsh, is all of these bites, if they know enough about them, were they the kind where a dog should have been on a leash, or are they the kind where person goes in the yard and gets bit or whatever happens.
I don't have much details other than what you've got in your packet there. In fact, what you see is what I was provided. I do know that in some cases they went through or over fences, that in some cases they should have been on a leash. I'm not debating that. I'm not gonna take your side of this and say we don't do anything because it's not being enforced
I
currently.
didn't say you don't do anything.
That's exactly the message you're sending.
No, I'm
And so
telling you,
I'm not even gonna entertain
I'm
it.
telling you
I
the
wanna do
same
something
message
to
you
make it
sent me.
better.
The same message you've sent me 4 or 5 times. If it isn't enforced, I'm not saying they're doing nothing. I'm just saying it's a difficult one to enforce, and then how many people do we have enforcing it? And it's in areas where, you know, the police can enforce their speeding by setting out on the street. But please don't misinterpret my words. I'm not saying you're doing nothing. I'm saying this is going to be a bear to enforce, because I've represented people who've been mangled by dogs for a long time.
Well, I agree it's gonna be hard to enforce.
And so I'd like to see it ended.
That's,
I'm on your side on the deal.
all your arguments seem to indicate that you
Well,
might think
my
there's a problem.
argument is enforcement.
Let's go.
I promise you this, I will not enforce this law myself one bit.
Well, you
Neither
try-
will anybody else on this council.
Right.
But we pay and retain people
Yes, we do.
that are qualified and perfectly able to perform that task.
Charlie's last one, and then we're gonna move forward.
I think the purpose here tonight was to put this out here and get our approval to put it out to the public for comment. We are going to get a lot of comment. We're gonna have an opportunity to discuss this amongst ourselves at least 3 other times on the floor, and probably in a work session before it even goes to the floor. We don't have to hash all of this out tonight. We just need to give these folks the approval to put it out there, which is what they're asking us to do. And I say yes.
Is everybody okay with putting it out publicly?
I'm just wondering if it has the right penalty for the leash law. Because the truth is, Councilman Wall, it isn't just enforcement that bothers me. You know what really bothers me? It's called
I don't
prevention.
know, it'll change next.
No, it's prevention.
I
Wouldn't
would
you
like,
to
I would
see-
like to see prevention too.
Yeah, I'm into prevention and enforcement.
Okay, let's move forward. Cardiac monitor replacement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
Do we really even have to talk about that? That sounds pretty important.
I'm for it.
Batteries get old, they can't
Good
recharge.
with that, that's everybody's
Bobby, you had
wish.
some comments.
Everybody need to hear the chief?
Yeah,
I need to hear it, Chief.
I would like to at least check.
How much work did I put into it, by the way? Are you sure? Are you sure, Chief?
Gary, if you had any point of order, I think one of our council members.
I just at least, I'm not saying this is not a good idea, it's just that, I really am a little bit concerned because we already have new gizmos in the ambulance that are gonna be bought to the tune of $39,000 apiece. We have operable gizmos that do this, and there were things that were said in that paper that were wrong. I clicked on this monitor online. You can go to Amazon, buy those batteries all day long. Matter of fact, you can buy rebuilt monitors for about a third of it, the same model. So I just, you know, and I understand where you guys are coming from. I know it's important, but I don't want to be, literally, I don't want to be stampeded because the people at the hospital think we need these. The people at the hospital can turn around and write these off. Every time somebody comes in and has a heart monitor, it's $1,000 on the bill. We don't have that option. If we've got one that's operable, I would suggest that we look, and maybe I can't buy them. I clicked on 6 batteries and it came up $2,490, and it said they were new. So while it may be a great thing, I guess I would just ask that we check this out a little bit. Is there something that this new machine absolutely does that our machines can't possibly do? You know, what?
Chief, you wanna say something?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember. I guess it's kind of twofold. One, that product is no longer being made by Philips. They are no longer going to make a fully functional cardiac monitor. So we are going to have to change eventually, no matter what. Our concern is the battery replacement and, you know, to have it serviced. They are also due for replacement, and actually, Chief Griswold started this back last fall as far as planning for it to do that. So this is why it's kind of been accelerated right now. The other point is interoperability and compatibility with the hospital, because again, once we put our monitor on as a Philips and they come in with a Zoll or a Physio, we have to actually either take it off or let them take our monitors. So again, there's no continuity of care when we do the patient transfer. So again, that's one of the reasons, we're trying to move this as quickly as we can, not so much that Wyoming Medical is dictating to us, but there is a practical application to continuity of care. The battery issue, I know I've had Chief Griswold check many places, and even when he went to purchase what we thought were new batteries, they couldn't provide them. I think we had some rebuilt batteries that he thought he had secured and still couldn't get them delivered.
Oh, I
So
just
I'm
went on
not sure-
Amazon.
Yeah, I'm not sure what sites you were looking at, but when he clicked on them, we could actually not get them delivered. The other thing that kind of sped this up was we're being told, whether it's Physio or Zoll that we replace our monitors with, we're looking at a 90 to 120 day delivery time at best. Because this is going on across the country. Anybody that has a Philips full capacity cardiac monitor has to replace it. So the only other two vendors are Physio and Zoll, and the length of delivery is extended period. So
ours-
again, that's why we have
Well,
brought
I guess
this
I'm
forward.
just saying, do ours work or don't they?
They do work, but again, as I've been talking with the manager, what I don't want is our batteries to go into failure if it's 120 days from now or 160 days from now and I can't get them. Because then I'll have to be standing in front of you explaining why our monitors fail.
I think it's a safety measure. It's critical.
Mr.
Support
Mayor, if
it.
I could add one more thing, the timing for this is really critical, because indeed if we're gonna get ahead of the ordering schedule and the deployment and so forth, we're actually talking to you about this a little bit ahead of the actual authorization that we'll be seeking, which would come in the form of the budget amendment that we've talked briefly about, that you'll be seeing here in a couple weeks. So what we hear tonight is that you're comfortable with the movement and the direction that the chief is describing. However, you should know the actual authorizing action won't take place until the amendment passes. So we're going to get on the stick and start ordering and get ahead of that a little bit and get your formal approval with the amendment.
Any other questions for the chief?
Well, I do have one real quick one. I know that the Blue Envelope has funded some AEDs around town and things. I don't know if that's possible for the city to ask them to help with this kind of a thing or not. I don't know. I'm just curious if that's.
And I don't know the program you're specifically talking about. I do know that the cost of an AED versus full
yeah,
functional,
way
you're
big,
talking
way big difference.
20 to almost $30,000.
Yeah. And it might be that their guidelines are just, well, they'll fund AEDs, but, cause I think that they, like for the cop cars and things like that, but, and that would answer that question. But that interoperability, that's a big issue. Former Councilman Steve Cathy had a cardiac problem in Yellowstone. By the time he got to West Park Hospital in Cody, I think he counted 5 different sets of pads that were put on, ripped off, put on, ripped off, put on, ripped off. That is a big issue, and if you don't doubt that, call Steve Cathy up and he'll tell you that story, and you'll be on board with this interoperability.
Dallas, Councilman Laird.
How old are the ones we have now?
The original one, those were purchased in 2012, and then I think the 6th one was 2013. So they're 6 to 7 years, which again, in our replacement cycle, they were scheduled to be replaced next budget year. It's just been accelerated because of the, and actually Philips has had recall is why they quit making the fully functional.
Well, it seems like pretty old equipment is computerized and what have you. I know some of the areas that I deal with that make that kind of equipment, they're usually outdated computer-wise. Now, it's ancient if it's 2 years old, sad to say.
And we look at like 5 to 7 years for replacement, which is, again, if nothing else would have happened, we would have stayed on that schedule.
Anything else? Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good.
Event guide. Now we can put it on the screen.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we've been working on consolidated, streamlined set of rules, if you will, that we want to be able to consistently rely upon to hand out to those folks throughout our community to manage events. And on occasion, we'll need assistance from the city. We are hopeful that the guide that you have in front of you via draft at this point does that. It gives every event organizer a real consistent view of the rules, if you will, what we expect and what we hope we can get by way of partnership and so on to make events happen, particularly since the event volume that we're experiencing and so on in the community is increasing, which we hope happens because we do think it helps the community be more vibrant and community oriented, etc. So we have gathered the event managers of the community together, and we've asked them for their input and data and guidance, and then we asked for it again, and then we asked for it again, and we have this as a result. And so, if I could turn some time over to Fleur and Carla to kind of go through some of the major elements and answer any questions you might have, we would hope that we could get a resolution of support ultimately to carry our event guide into practice.
Your Honor, members of council, we are here to present the event guide. As Carter mentioned, we have gone through it several times. We have made it more clear and concise. And the whole goal of it is just to make it easier for citizens to come in and plan an event and have one stop to come to get all their permits and all their licensing needs met. With that, I'll turn it over to Carla. She's going to go through briefly the guide, and then we'll go over the application, and we're happy to take questions as we go on or at the very end, whichever works out better.
Thank you, Fran. Your Honor, members of council, during the eclipse of 2017, we discovered that our current processes were in need of updating. We realized that we needed to streamline the process, and we needed to simplify it for our customers. Next slide. We're going to go briefly through the major sections of the guide. When the customer gets the guide, they will first encounter definitions. That's just to let them know some terms that they will come upon and define those for them. The next is the impact classification schedule. That is just to let them know the characteristics of the event and let them understand the process that will be necessary for them to take. It will also outline the costs of the application and the deadline. Of course, the larger the event, the earlier the deadline and the more the fees. One reason for that is because it will take more staff time from the city of Casper. It also explains the staff preparation to the customer to let them know what the staff will be doing. The last part of that is the insurance requirements for the customer. This will include for the customer help to work with their insurance provider and to make sure that the city is adequately covered. Now that we quickly went over the guide, we will go through the application process. This is the first page of the application. This just gives a brief, basic summary of their event, and it just gives the city staff a basic picture of what their event is going to entail. The second part is the facility equipment. This will be, are they going to use a stage? Will they be utilizing tents? Depending on the size, we might have to refer them to get a tent permit from the fire department. And depending, of course, if they want to use stakes in the ground, they might have to get with the parks department. So several departments will have to coordinate that also. The second part is alcohol. The next part is alcohol. We just need to know if they plan on using alcohol, and if so, what permits they are planning to apply for. The next portion is restrooms and waste management plan. This became a huge, I wouldn't say issue, but it became kind of a big deal during the eclipse. This is very important. This just gives us, gives the customer a picture, and it helps them plan what they're going to need. The next portion is parking and traffic and the street closure. This would coordinate with our streets department and our police department. What the traffic impact is going to be, we need to also communicate with our residents if there's going to be a street closure, and kind of evaluate if the portion of the street that they want to close is going to be okay. Sometimes it's going to be a main thoroughfare, and it's not going to be an option. We do give them other suggestions rather than just say no. The next portion is if they're going to have amusement rides or carnival rides, we will have to get fire inspection and building and code inspection. The loud sound restrictions, they have to follow our current already in place noise ordinance. If they want to go above that, they will have to ask permission to do so. The public notification plan is also part of the application. We want to make sure that our citizens are aware of any of detours in their daily route. We want to make sure that our business owners are not negatively affected and or that they're being cut off. Next is vendors, and this could be merchandise or food. We want to make sure that for our public, they're licensed and the safety of our public. The last page is the emergency action plan, security, and cancellation. If something does go wrong, we want to know that they are prepared for it and they can handle it. Security, we want to make sure that they have, if it's a big enough event, that security is walking around, kind of keeping an eye on the crowd. And then if something goes wrong and they cancel, how are they going to notify us, and how are they going to notify the people that are going to this event? If it's approved to move forward, what we would have to do is go to formal adoption by ordinance. 21 days after that, after the third reading, it would become effective. What we would like to do is make the application available online. Most of the event organizers do this as a side gig. They are not professional event organizers, so they usually have to do this on their lunch hours, sometimes after work, sometimes before work. So this would give them the ability to, if they have time at midnight, send me the application online, a fillable form. That is it. Are there any questions?
Questions for Carla or Fleur? Everybody good? All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well done.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I'm going to have Dallas maybe talk a little bit about the anti-bullying resolution. He's got a couple requests for us on it and wanting to move that forward. I don't know if you have anything to add to your conversations. But Dallas has have a couple requests for us. One, obviously, who is in favor of supporting the resolution. And two, next week we do not have a meeting, but I know Dallas had made a request to me about the possibility of having a special meeting because he'd like to have it passed in October, as October is the anti-bullying month. If we did decide to do that, that would be something we'd have to do next week and have a special meeting if we decided to do that. But I just wanted to kind of put that in there and see where that's at. And Dallas and I chatted a little bit yesterday about it to see what we needed to do. So I'm going to kind of take away and give Dallas the floor to talk about that a little bit. I think everybody's read the resolution. So go ahead, Dallas.
You kind of summed it up. I did some kind of in-depth research about it and found out that there's only 1 or 2 states in the whole United States that don't have bullying statutes. And difficult as it is, they're passing them. And this is anti-bullying month, which I didn't know until I started doing research earlier. And I thought a statement by the city council stating we're, the obvious, we're against bullying. What I think a resolution does, and what I've seen happen, is that it gives people, it started with yours, the LBGT thing. I think that gave a lot of people a lot of comfort, even though it wasn't a law. I think the idea of the resolution for school safety, I think there are parents, there are people out there that just feel like we're thinking about that. With respect to this, there's a lady whose child got bullied recently and seriously physically injured. And she called me. There's nothing I can do about it because of being on the council, but I think she needs to be known as to what happened. I guess there's a video on it in the school bus of what happened to her child. But there's a lot of these bullying situations where there are adults on the bus who say they know nothing about it. And it goes on and on and on. And I know the school board is working on anti-bullying rules. Of course, we're the ones who pass the laws. So, and I certainly don't want to have people come to a special meeting if they don't want to. Doesn't, I guess, have to be passed in October. I think it's just important for us to make a statement about it, a timely statement about it. And whatever it may lead to, I would hope that the councilman in the future will come up with an actual ordinance that might have some impact. Because now, some kids get bullied, and under the current rules, they can't, the parent comes in to see me or any other lawyer, we've had conferences about it with other lawyers, and they can't find out, for little kids, they can't find out the name of the person who bullied them. And this person's now left with, it's kinda like the dog bites. You got terrible injuries and you can't do anything about it. And in the bullying case, the kid has injuries and the school won't release the name of the bully. And they could bring an action and at least collect money, if the person's parents had an insurance policy for general liability on their homes. That kind of thing is covered. This one little girl I'm talking about, that's the most tragic bite I've ever seen on a child. And it was just a little child going over to a neighbor's yard. She left the gate open and went in there. I mean, they've had to do these skin grafts and all this. Of course, Medicaid is taking care of it. Nothing happened to those people with the dog. The woman who owned it was living in the house, and of course then there's a big argument over the insurance, and the people moved away and I got him another lawyer. But it's just a matter of how you end it, which is some of these school teachers tell me, some of them just don't do anything. They don't want to get involved in it. And others who may want to thank somebody, well, they can't do that, but that isn't what I'm doing. I would like people look at us as though we should say things about injustices in this city. And that's the entire matter. Councilman Wall said it earlier. For whatever reason he said it, those resolutions really don't have any effect, but I think they do have an effect. I think it's kind of akin sometimes to just putting a police car up by a school, and it's a deterrent to certain kinds of action. And so that's what I'm looking at here. I hope it passes. And I've had people who've been bullied make those kind of comments to me. They wish we'd do something about it, because they live with them all their lives.
So I've got Charlie, Mike, and Chris, so I have comments or questions.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing this forward, Dallas, and I'm going to support it. Let's be careful in our statements. The school district has been implementing anti-bullying programs for over 25 years, and it's very hard to prove a negative, that is, that someone didn't get bullied because of those programs. The first time I testified in a public setting on a prevention program that was similar to these anti-bullying programs, I think was before a school board in 1982. So, I mean, people have been working on this problem, and it's true that it's taken the board some time to draft a policy, because that has to involve penalties and suspensions and those kind of things, and they have to have all that language very much clarified. But let's just be careful in our statements that we don't say nobody's doing anything about it, or no, everyone's ignored this problem, because that's really not the case. And there have been some very positive and I believe effective programs that have been implemented both throughout the district and in specific schools. So it's not a new problem. It's an extremely complex problem. The bullies themselves are impaired kids who have often been victims of child abuse. I'm not making excuses for their behavior, but they are not kids that come from, for the most part, strong and supportive families. They're picking on other kids because they're not in a good place themselves. And so trying to help them and help the kids that they are persecuting is a twofold problem. And it's just very complex. So,
Like,
but I
comment on the thing.
but I do support passing a resolution.
I'm not saying anything negative about the school board. I know they're working very hard on it. I do know this, that there's a little bit of a stranglehold on them by some of the laws that our legislature should be addressing. They have to follow whatever the law is, and I know how difficult that is for them. And I know many of those people, and they do want the safety of their children. So what I'm saying is nationwide, legislatures have not taken this the way they should have. Now they're finally getting an awareness, and they're dealing with it. That particular resolution, that I looked at several resolutions, and you know what, the one that I felt was the most detailed and understood issue, the blank, you know who it was prepared by? The NAACP. Because I'm guessing those kids have suffered mightily from bullying over the years. And so theirs was very strong, because theirs was directed at schools and wanting laws passed that would require the school to come forth with rules, and then the legislatures to come forth with laws to stop this, because now they're saying that the bullying, you know, I guess they're saying that some of these kids that go and shoot up schools, they were bullied at the school, and there's not an easy, you can see the effects of it all, but it's very difficult sometimes to see causation. And people see effects, you know, this kid was bit by a dog, or this truck ran into somebody. But what was the cause of that? And we have to deal with that all the time.
Just a quick follow-up, and I think the other problem that we should recognize is that school districts have a very hard time implementing programs designed to address bullying because they require class time. And teachers are under tremendous pressure now to meet certain objectives academically, and every minute of class time is jealously guarded. And so trying to require that certain kinds of things be put into the classroom curriculum that might address these kinds of problems is becoming more and more difficult, because teachers are being evaluated on the academic progress of their kids, and anti-bullying programs don't improve reading skills or math skills. And so it is a real conundrum as far as how districts should manage these problems, because there's only so many hours in the day.
Some people want to bring the paddle back. It's not a big deal.
Mr. Mayor, I suspect that all of us, are opposed to bullying. I don't know, I can't imagine anybody, oh yeah, I'm in favor of that. But I think, and this ordinance, and when we think about bullying, the classic thing, we think about the playground bully and that kind of thing. You think about it affecting kids, and it does affect kids, and it's really, and the effect on kids is a big thing. I would like to see this changed, and I would suggest the language in the first whereas, where it says consequences affecting youth across the country. I would like to see that say people, young and old alike. And then as we go down, talks about one place here where it talks about about the third or fourth whereas, affecting their concentration in schools. And I'd like to see that say school, work, and social settings, because I think that this is a problem that is bigger than just dealing with kids. There are adults that get bullied. There are all, bullies come in all shapes, sizes, ages, and stripes and everything. And I think that it's important that we address this, but I also think it's kind of important that we say, this is wrong whether if you're young, old, or wherever you are in that thing. So I'd like to see those things, and I don't think that would dilute the effectiveness of saying, the particular negative effects that it has on kids.
Chris?
Would you consider adding a whereas that said, because I think the school district's done with their, I think they passed a policy, and that we support their, obviously you want to take a look at it, that we support their efforts in anti-bullying.
I just want us to make a statement, Chris. I think it's important that we make a statement.
That's fine, I mean, I think you
And I-
typically wanna
and
fight
I
with me,
would
but
like
I'm
to
with
s-
you on this.
I
I
would
would
like
just
to
like
see
to add
it.
that added in there.
Yeah, I would like to see what theirs is, and I'm sure it's well done.
Well researched, I believe.
Well, they wanna be good to our children, I believe that.
And there's has to be some, they have to actually, have an enforcement mechanism in the schools, so, I mean, it's broader, I think, than just a regular policy, but.
Could we pass this, and then when they announce theirs, we can have another vote and another resolution backing their resolution?
I'm just asking if you would add that, whereas in
I would.
yours.
Yeah, I would. Give Mr. Henley the wording you want.
That's a good one. Bob and Jesse.
Yeah, I concur with Councilman Huber. This is too narrow. The school district's already addressing this. When in my years of living, I've seen a lot more bullies who are adults than children. And we all experienced bullies when we were in school, that's for sure. But since I've been out of school, I've really encountered a lot of bullies. Especially when it comes to old age. You see people old age being browbeat all the time. And it's even done on television, on radio. Did you do this? Do you need this? You know, it's a con. And this is just too narrow. All this does is address the issue that the school district's already addressed. So if you guys would agree to change this thing and make it more inclusive, bullying period, including in this room.
I'm good with it. I'm good
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. Your game?
Jesse.
I just want to quickly add that it would be nice to actually do something apart from a resolution. So whether it's teaming up with fellow council members, going to a school and talking about the effects of bullying, or even having people with public safety, whether it's a firefighter or a police officer in a classroom setting working with the Trent County School District talking about bullying. Just trying to find out. I think it was South Lake Department of Public Safety. They did a little thing on their Facebook page, and it was just a picture of an officer talking about bullying, and this is their proactive measure of trying to tackle that instead of a resolution and then nobody does anything. So I'd rather see either us around this table or a combined effort with people within our organization and the school board working together of just positive figures talking about not bullying other people.
And what I hope, Jesse, is that a resolution is kind of like a mission statement that would do exactly what you said. Where you have that, that's how we feel we're here because of, this is our mission at the city to end bullying, and I'd be happy to figure out what I would have to say first and do anything like that, because I think it's a terrible problem, and I've dealt with it from a legal standpoint for a long time, and it's very hurtful to see kids coming in and their parents coming in and they're hurt and there's nothing they can do about it.
So I guess first things first is, if anybody has any other comments, with the suggestions of what Mike has said and then Chris's suggestion too, is there support for Dallas's resolution? Okay. With those. Second, I do agree with Jesse. Although I haven't had a lot of time to go into the schools as I have recently, I do agree that I think that there's some level that we have to, with the work that I've done with the Youth Empowerment Council and some other groups, but just a message in the community, and whether that happens in the next month, 2 months, or whatever, and I know your guys' time is short.
69 days.
69 days. What that looks like, and I think that it's one thing to say it on paper, and I understand where Dallas is coming from, and because I get it. I've been a part of it. I've worked with in schools and kids for a long time, and so I see it. It's there. It happens. But how do we change that? How do we change that culture? And so I think Jesse is right about instead of how can we take it from paper to create that cultural change, not only with our youth but also with the elderly, with anybody. To do that. So
one step at a time.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor.
I
One
agree.
step at a time, like everything.
I agree.
And the thing I thought about at 29th meeting with Councilman Walsh is if we came down here just to pass the resolution, and we did that, I wouldn't make any statements, and we'd be out of here. And it covers one of the meetings we're gonna miss at the end, because we're not gonna have a meeting the last 2 Tuesdays of this year. But to come down here for a 5-minute meeting, then I could say, in part of my 69 days, I attended one of the shortest meetings the council had ever had.
If we have a meeting where Councilman Laird doesn't say anything, I'll buy drinks for everybody.
I'm on for that. Just get the resolution out, get it passed, and be gone.
Charlie?
I think the number of people who would note that we passed it after the anti-bullying month, you could count on one hand.
Well, it's $150 a head to have a meeting plus
But
$50.
let's just wait till our next meeting.
I'm okay with that too, Charlie.
Do you promise not to talk at that meeting?
No, that only applies to, that only applies to the 2-minute meeting.
So everybody's okay to have it on that, our next meeting?
Bob,
pass
you
that
didn't see what I was
resolution?
trying to do. I was trying to
Yeah.
make you the
I don't
$150
agree with the
because
next
you're gonna
meeting.
lose 300
Yeah.
at the end of the month.
That's okay, I can handle it.
You don't agree with waiting?
No, I agree with waiting. I don't agree with adding another meeting.
Oh, okay.
Just
So we'll
for
do that at our next meeting, which is the 6th, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thank you, guys. Agenda review. Carter, anything on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, yep, you bet.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be gone, you know, on the 13th of November. We can do it the 6th.
We will do it the 6th, yeah.
I'm gonna be gone the 13th of November too.
And he's going to the same place I'm going.
Well,
He's
people
one of
are
my
gonna-
cronies, we're going to the
Yeah.
same place.
The couple things I wanted to bring to your attention. If you'll notice in the pre-meeting of November 6th, which is our next meeting, we will be giving you an update on our progress with regard to discussing the health fund, and we'll also be bringing forward at least the police portion of the budget amendment as well. We wanted to get that in front of you, and that it probably, those two items will be the biggest items that will constitute the budget amendment coming up on the 13th, as you can see on your later portion of your grid. Another item that I know you'll be anticipating will be twofold for the 13th, the event center audit as well as the legislative agenda. We are at the point now where we need to really have good direction from the council as it pertains to what we can advocate for and so on as we're visiting with the legislature. Committee meetings are being had now, and we're entertaining we're hearing a lot of testimony, we're hearing a lot of discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to be armed appropriately when we get into the legislative session with your agenda. And with that, I'd entertain any questions about the prospectus for our meetings.
Anything on the agendas on there that are not on there, anything moving forward? Jesse?
I didn't see parking on the parkways that we kind of let die slowly and into the night. Maybe at some point we can allow for an exemption. I think there should be an exemption on 12th and 13th Street and also 15th Street personally to allow parking on the parkways.
I would agree with that.
Outside of that, I think the other streets are wide enough.
Just change the names of
That's fine.
non-park.
Do not pop over McKinley, give me an example.
Do we need that?
I agree with that.
We do.
It doesn't look right.
Is that something that council would like to put back on the work session? Jesse's bringing that back
Well,
up.
we don't have to, I'm just saying, I mean, it's up to you guys.
That's what I was gonna say, is that something that council would be willing to
I'd be in favor of
rediscuss?
that.
Having that discussion?
Wasn't it?
I might
someone was
want to
asking.
consider, we could have a number of new people after January. And I'm not sure we wouldn't want to at least have them get involved in it rather than air it, something half done.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Parkway thing, I'm trying to remember the sequence, because we were initially willing to make some exceptions, and then we revisited it, and after an exhaustive discussion, decided that we didn't want to do that. And I don't remember it seems to me before we go into it again, maybe we should be reminding ourselves of the sequence that we've already gone through on this. Because we did, in my recollection, say, oh, wait a minute, now that we look
I don't
at this
think we took
again,
any action at all.
We said, no, we can't make any
They can still
exceptions.
park there.
The guy outlined it pretty well for us, I thought.
Yeah, we discussed it, came up with a lot of different methods, and then realized that we're gonna do nothing.
We did blame it on waiting for the,
We blamed it on
Study,
the
which
study,
didn't cover it.
and I think we might have used that as a cover as saying this, we're just not ready to tackle this.
So I don't know if you heard, I think you might have stepped out for a second. Jesse just brought up what we were gonna plan of possibly having another discussion about that. Wanted to know, so I didn't know if people were okay where we were at. Charlie had made the suggestion that do we need to, revisit, you know, where we came, when we went with it, but if that's our recollection, you know, it's kind of up to you guys.
I haven't heard
They
it.
can park there now, right? So that gets what Jesse wants, so why not leave it alone?
I thought they can, but I thought planning and zoning was specifically looking towards us for an answer for what they.
Well, there's all those things. The thing is, I don't know, I haven't had anybody contact me since we talked about it one way or the other. And I guess before we decided to do something, we should, maybe hear from code, see if there's a problem.
Are you hearing anything, Jesse?
No,
No.
not at all.
Okay.
I can give you a little background from what P and Z did. P and Z voted to disallow it.
They did, yeah, they came and told us.
And then we had our discussions after that, and I don't think we ever got any further.
Kind
And
of
it came up
from P and Z.
when Mr. King was here 2 weeks ago, he asked where it stood,
That's right.
so.
If I remember right, sir.
Oh, you're good.
We were going to have a permit with an annual fee.
Mhm.
And then there was the whole issue of, well, what if somebody with a permit parks in front of your house and you have a permit too? How do you resolve that? And so the whole thing just became a quagmire.
Yeah, that's in fact probably right.
And it really isn't a problem.
So is it
It's
council?
not a problem.
It's council prerogative to let it lie then for now?
I'm happy with that.
I'm okay with that.
Until we, as long as the police department doesn't enforce it, right?
Mr. Mayor, that's the problem. The ordinance does not allow parking on the parkway. And that's what I wanna make sure I understand at least.
I've forgotten people.
I'm happy to let it go as long as the police
Now,
department
that's-
doesn't enforce it.
That's why I kind of thought maybe we should bring that back up, because I think you're right about what the ordinance says.
People have seen managed.
How about we just have a work session
They've
topic
done,
and so we can
they've
discuss
done
it?
everything.
Since we're discussing it now anyways.
All right.
I agree with Sean.
Have a work
I
session.
agree
with Sean.
Get on with it.
I think Chris is right, we want to, and the parking study's done, so we should go back and look at it. Yeah, I think Bob's right. I think you should do it in 69 days when the 3 new people come on and get all new input.
I'm
Take
fine
So-
with that.
Exactly
I'm-
what you
So
said.
I'm
Chief-
fine with waiting until after
So I
the first of the
Chief and
year.
I just talked to, and he said he's gonna get caught up on the issue too, as far as the ordinance and everything. I mean, it probably is gonna end up being that we're gonna be moving into
Let's
the
do
new
it
council.
2019.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it's gonna end up being. But Jesse, I
never
think
talked about
Chief's gonna maybe get a hold
If
of
he
you.
goes and enforces that,
That might be a problem.
he won't have time to do anything else.
Then he
I
can
want-
enforce
I
dog
want some
leashes.
leash enforcement.
Or bees and chickens.
Yeah. Wild chickens
You're
running.
counting the days, Dallas. So
69 days.
Some people might
Packs
find
of
out
chickens.
the hours
There
and
are all packs of
minutes.
chickens taking over the downtown.
Charlie, legislative update.
Okay, a couple of things. The WHAM Winter Conference will be held in Cheyenne, February 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And just to give you a feel for it, there will be breakout sessions on financial management, public records, cybersecurity, community planning and economic development, strategic planning, the municipal lien process, which we have struggled with.
You'll
It
never
looks,
be mayor
looks
if you keep
worthwhile.
leaving.
This is a lobby.
The other thing I want to make sure people are aware of is that WHAM has released their training video series, and this is done specifically because people can't always get to the conferences, and so this way you can go through some of these things online. And there are seven of them available, and Carter did one on open meetings. But there's one on basic responsibilities of the governing body, legal framework for municipal government, what allows us to exist, the Public Records Act, ethics and conflict of interest, and the fundamentals of municipal budgeting. These are all available on the web, the WHAM website. So I hope you'll consider going to the WHAM workshop in February.
Thanks, Charlie. Chris, anything?
I thought it was You're looking at me like I was
I know.
scheduled to bring some up. I'm like, I have trouble.
I don't know.
I have nothing.
Mike, you have anything?
I do. We had discussed the idea of having a formal swearing in for Judge Lund in municipal court. I've been talking to her, and what we've kind of decided is that rather than doing anything like that, what we will do is we'll plan a kind of an open house for the municipal court, and we have tentatively scheduled that for Thursday, January 17th at 3 in the afternoon. And I think, you know, the more that I thought about that, I really think that's a good way of doing that, because there are several things that she's working on and kind of changing that by that point there might be some people, you know, that it would be very opportune to have a little presentation and say, this is the way that we're doing things here now, and it'd be informative to lawyers and everybody else. And so I think that's a pretty good idea.
Bob.
Nothing, thank you.
Jesse.
Yeah, a couple of questions. So with the new animal control ordinance, could we get a link when that is available on the website, or is that available right now? But when it's live, that'd be great to have that on hand.
We will do that.
And then just follow up for the International Fire Code of 2018. Somebody brought up that when you have a food truck, for instance, and you're trying to get an inspection on your propane lines, for example, that they have to be registered with the U.S. Department of Transportation. And then they also, in that same paragraph, list that you also can provide a list of approved vendors to take care of that. So my question to us is, do we have an approved vendor list here in the city of Casper? Because the person that raised this concern said that there's nobody with that type of training or registration by the U.S. Department of Transportation to inspect the propane line. And I'm not sure if that's from the current 2018 code that we just adopted or previous.
Go ahead, Chief.
Mayor, Councilman, I'll have to check for sure, but I know I've had some discussions with our community risk folks as far as the process that they have to go through for the inspection. I just don't know if we have an actual vendor list that can do that.
Okay.
So I'll have to check and get back to you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks. That's all I have.
Dallas.
I'm directing this to you, Charlie. I think it's important. There's two things I don't like. One is change orders and WHAM. But I might start liking WHAM if you could get them to come up with a legislative agenda that would incorporate a change in the law so that what happened to us with this taxation problem won't happen again. Which means that we can look, it's just like, I don't know if you've all seen the chart, we're the only county with minus money, minus 16% on sales tax for this quarter as for this month as compared to the month in 2017. Converse County is up 86%. Every county's up. We're down 14, and that is because I think of this issue with having to pay this money back. So our statistics are going to look bad, be published bad, and it could be changed if all we had was, here are the biggest taxpayers in the county, and it would have said Solvay International of Green River, Wyoming, we probably would have caught it, and we wouldn't be in this bind. So whatever WHAM has to do to get that law changed, and I know our legislators are wanting to do something about it, but I would wish you could get WHAM behind that. With respect to this,
It's already in my filing system.
thank you. I don't see a specific penalty in here, Councilman Walsh, for not having your dog on a leash. I would like to see, I'm kind of like you are, you want something in my resolution, I want something in your ordinance that has a specific penalty if you're not leashed, and it ought to be a good one to get somebody's attention. Now, Mr. Henley, you have this paragraph D under 604-360 violation penalty. You have a statement about surrendering the dog where it says in the last sentence of D, in the event of surrender, the court may impose such sentence as it determines to be just. I think that's a fatal flaw in the sentencing. I don't think we can give a judge carte blanche on what to do. She's got to have parameters. So if you look into that, find out that I'm right, change it. If I'm wrong, then forget what I've said. The other thing is the involves Tim and some work he's doing, and this isn't anything about the work you're doing, but having the skiers that I've talked to and some of a particular vendor who sent you all an email doesn't want to turn Hogadon ski area into a snowmobile racing area on a prime weekend of the end of the season. And they have leases, they're counting on all that time to make money. If the snowmobiles come up here, the ski guys aren't gonna make any money. And that's how they see it. And so I think one of them lives in my ward. And what I have seen, and I have gone to those things, and I've enjoyed them, and where I've seen them is the races up in Jackson, but they do it after the lift shift shut down and the season's over with. And here they'd be, the way that, where they want to do the races will still have snow in April, and that could be carried on in April. It wouldn't interfere with the skiers, because it does tear up the slopes and they have to be regroomed. And so who knows what that it would entail and the kinds of snowmobiles that are up there. But they're gonna come down and speak, I guess, next week. There's several of them are gonna come down. But I've never seen the skiers get quite so tied up about something that they're doing.
Carter said you can.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, thank you for bringing that up. The whole concept was driven by folks in the community who are trying to drum up different types of activity and business here in the community. And so we were approached as staff to see if we would have an interest in supporting that type of an event with a facility that we own and manage. We had a visit as early as today, I believe it was, right, Tim, with Mr. Butcher, wherein they're willing to look at other weekends. And so that's effectively where we're at. I got concerned with regard to some of the communication that I saw anyway that indicated staff had dreamed up some proposal, and that's just not the case. We were approached, we're trying to be facilitative, and again, we're facilitating a different weekend.
Well, the staff's job too to rip up proposals, isn't it?
At least facilitate,
I would think
right?
so. We do
Yeah.
own it. It's just, we do, but it is a ski area. But I think moving it into April, and I think the boogeyman will go away,
Okay.
and they'll still have a good time, and whoever makes money on, because it's spring break, and that's when a lot of these kids come. It's about the only time you can ski here when it's warm. Blah-de-blah-de-blah, you know?
Everything?
Yeah, Leisure Board met last week, and we met at the golf course, and it was just a kumbaya meeting because golf nationwide is in decline, but our course did well. Overall income was up 4%. Passes are down, but there's just more people just coming after work and playing 9 holes and paying their green fees. They hosted 2 new tournaments, and the course is just in excellent shape, and all the user groups were very happy with how they were treated and how the course was playing, and the restaurant quality has apparently improved considerably. They've had some weddings and a pool league going on there, so it was just a good thing, and the golf course is the only amenity we own that runs in the black. So
You may not need an RFP up there. Plus, it's your longest city employee that works there.
there was some discussion of the purchasing of water, and I understand there's some discussion of whether there's a way to retain more of the mountain water, and so that they don't have to purchase potable water as much, but that would be a major construction project. So, but no, it's very good. Things are going
And
well.
we're actually making money on food. We should turn the food up at Hogadon over to this guy and the event center, and then Raymond will make money.
Spectrum, the cable company, kind of highlights some stuff. If you're interested in taking that, they've obviously spared. This is where I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but anyway, you know where the where our money goes. It's very nice. So if you want to be able to do that, Charlie, I think for some reason your name wasn't on it, but if you want that, pass those around. They're in there.
figured this one must be mine.
I'm figuring,
Okay.
yeah, because I didn't see your name otherwise. The other one too that I just had is that every year that this time of year, Wyoming Symphony gives tickets. So if you're interested, they have December 1st and they have November 3rd. Two for the first. One is Love of Nature and then one is Exhilaration. Chris, do you want the Exhilaration?
I was busy reading, but no, that's. I don't want to take that up from somebody.
You want two for that? Anybody else want anything? I'm gonna leave them here if you guys want those. They're pretty nice tickets. So. Change your mind.
But I'll give you
Send me a
all.
text.
Me and Dallas will go.
You and Dallas can go to Exhilaration.
Put on our tutus and hang out. Well, I will say this, Councilman Walsh. I saw Trump hug Senator Cruz the other night at his rally. And they had
Lion
some
did?
struggles. Now they're buddies. Now he's calling him Texas Ted.
And of course, he's calling himself one.
No, it's nice.
It's actually
wonderful.
not. It's actually not at all.
Are we done? That's it. Thanks. All right, guys. Tickets are up here if you're interested. I'll put them back at the with Renee.